Welcome to the Sharp Way Show. Yes, it is Larry Sharp here about a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and it's Friday night, and yes, I'm not out partying. Well, I usually am not out partying. That's okay. You don't have to know that. Anyway, it's 7, so I wouldn't be partying it anyway. Any case, I'm happy that you are here with me this evening, a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast, which means you should be looking at me, and I'm glad that you are. And today we have a very special show. I know some of you have been talking about this online on how special this show is. You're right, it is, because we're talking to someone about a very different, another party that has been in the news recently, last couple of years. And we're going to get some insight today from a member of the Forward Party. He is the national organizing director. He is the man himself, Will Conway. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm pumped up after that intro music, man. That was fun.
There we go. Let's hope we actually do something good. I hope we do. I hope we do after all.
I was never much of an athlete, so it's probably the closest I'm going to get to a big pump up walkout.
We'll figure it out. You know what? I should have had you come through the sheets or whatever. I should have had you do that.
Exactly.
I messed up. Next time. Yeah, next time. So if you want to follow what Will's doing, you can follow him on Twitter at Hey Will Conway. And hey, if you are listening to the podcast, HEY, like Hey You, Hey Will Conway on Twitter, and you can see all the cool stuff that he's doing. Well, I have to ask you, Will, this is not your first rodeo. You have been in politics for a while, and you've also been in mainstream politics, right? You've been in the left-right paradigm. You've been there also. So why go forward? Why do the forward thing?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So it's not my first rodeo. I think we're somewhere past the second or third rodeo too. So my career started in the very sad, lonely little world of Connecticut Republican politics, which is
there are Republicans in Connecticut. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, it was me and two other guys. It was
That's what I thought.
Pretty brutal.
Yes,
but yes, back in 2011, back when the Republican Party could, I think, reasonably make an argument for being full of statesmen, at least in New England anyway. And I kind of came up in that world. I liked it was Congressman locally, Christopher Shays, who was just a staunch, thoughtful character, and I really liked that version of the Republican Party. It's Connecticut, so basically it's all Democrats, and then there are 4 Republicans in the corner who are just like, hey, can you chill on taxes a little bit? And I was like, these guys seem
no, I live in New York City, so I understand completely. It's the opposite, right? In New York City, we are so Democratic, so left, that what you do is when you want to run for office, they ask you, they say, are you a communist? And you go, yes. Okay, Democrat. Are you a communist? No, I'm a regular socialist. Okay, Republican. That's how it works. Yes.
You're in the Bronx, am I right?
I'm from the Bronx, but now I live in Queens.
Oh, nice. Oh my gosh, I'm in Long Island City.
We're next to each other. I'm in Astoria.
Oh my God. Yeah, let's go out for drinks sometime.
We're gonna hang out this weekend. Let's do it.
Nice. Where was I though? Connecticut Republican.
So you left Connecticut Republican Party and decided, I love Andrew Yang, and I'm now gonna be forward. That's what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Well, a few more steps. I mean, years went by, right? It was 2011, so imagine that time to come into Republican politics. 2011, 2012, Tea Party starts to pick up steam. All of a sudden, Sarah Palin is not looking like a one-time shindig.
And Obama's still very popular then.
Right. And the more time that passed, it felt like, what's the way to say this? The longer time went on, it felt like the harder I worked, the more the party drifted from the values that I really cared about. And not even, the values are part of it, but also just the manner of being. We're seeing the world really tribally. We're playing team sports. I was on campaigns where it got brutal.
I remember, very often when I was campaigning, particularly in 2018, but also 2022.
Yeah.
Many Republicans said that I was more Republican than the Republicans. Because they were looking at what the Republicans were supposed to be about, right? What supposedly their core values are, which, to your point, many of the actual people, and this is left and right, do not at all follow what the principle. Democrats are supposed to be anti-war. They're not, right? But they're supposed to be.
The world has changed a little bit.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry.
but
Am I messing you up? I'm not trying to
no,
mess
no,
you up.
I'm
I
great. I'm
apologize.
great. I was just leaving off. I was realizing I was in 2016 there. So yeah, it gets so bad. By the time 2016 rolls around, we'll talk about this a little more later. I'd worked for a software company in Los Angeles. I'd left Republican politics. I was working for a company called Nation Builder,
Oh,
still,
sure.
pretty large scale in the world of politics, fairly well known.
Yep.
And I was running politics and advocacy there. And I 2016 election night, it's an LA tech startup. It's a very different type of person than the people I'd met
Absolutely.
earlier in my career. So election night 2016, Donald Trump is becoming more and more obvious that he's going to win this election. And the people around me are getting distraught. They're really sad. It's mostly, West Coast progressive type folks.
Yep.
And on my phone, I'm
You're
looking
right.
down.
This messed them up in New
Yeah,
York. I knew people who were crying when
right.
Trump won. I mean, literally like crying. They were broken up about it. I remember. Yeah.
Right, right. And then I'm looking down at my phone with all these people who I really respected, like crying around me, looking down at my
Yep.
phone, early career mentors, people I'd come up with early in politics, former colleagues, friends, who were just like text threads, Twitter DMs, etc., just dunking on those stupid libs and oh yeah, those
Hmm.
idiots. And in that moment, I had this recognition was that I know both of these groups of people and I really like them a lot. How is it that they can't figure out a way to have a conversation? Like, how are we
Right.
so far past the pale that this is
Right.
impossible? So everything I've really done since that moment is a matter of figuring out how I can create a world in which people can communicate with each other coherently
Yep.
to build trust with each other in local and national communities, and then work towards solutions that actually work for everybody. So that's the
So you were at Nation Builder, right?
yeah,
And if I understand Nation Builder, and I think I may even still use, I did use Nation Builder. I use Anecdote now, I think. And I've also used Nation Builder too.
sure.
When I ran in 2018, we had Nation Builder. I feel like Nation Builder was kind of what you were talking about, meaning that, well, what Nation was supposed to be. I don't know what it actually is now. Actually, I don't know now, but
Yeah.
I know it was kind of a way of staying in contact with people, right? Like being able to touch them, almost like a Salesforce in a way, but more personal is how
Mm.
I felt it. Is that what you, is that why you were with Nation Builder? Because you kind of wanted to build that out?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, what the most powerful thing in the world is empowering leaders to actually go out and do the work of leading and empowering ordinary citizens to become leaders in the first place.
Right.
Well, leadership can mean quite a few things, but as time has progressed, the barrier to entry to leadership has actually gone way down. Nation Builder is part of it, which is that what leadership should mean is that you're able to cultivate relationships with lots of folks and serve those people in ways that are
Sure.
interesting and unique and powerful. So the point of Nation Builder is to allow people to cultivate individual relationships at scale. An individual
Mhm.
humans only is there's a fun little Wikipedia rabbit hole called Dunbar's number. An
Oh, I know it.
individual, yeah, yeah. So for
It's
the
based
benefit of
upon, it's actually the evidence that we've known this forever. For those of you who don't know, Dunbar's number is the amount, the average amount of people an individual can kind of know, have a relationship
right,
with. And it's one of the reasons why a company of in the military is that number. A company, which is the basic military unit of the military, is between 100 and 125, 150 people
yeah. Yeah,
because of that
that's
number.
exactly right because that's
Yeah.
right about where that number is now. Each individual fluctuates a bit. Some people are much lower, some people are much higher. But
Sure.
generally speaking, if you were to check your Christmas card list, if you were to, look at how many people, if you just bumped into them on the street, you'd actually be like happy to see.
Yep.
The Robert Dunbar described it as the number of people who, if you saw in a bar, you would sit down with a drink and not feel weird about it. It's like
Right.
that it's that
Right.
population of people. So anyway, the reason that matters is when you think about politics, um, the number of relationships an individual person can build is 150. So if we're running your next gubernatorial campaign, you got 10 people on staff. Optimistically, 10 people on staff. Well, you got 10 people times 150 relationships. You got 1,500 relationships to spend. So what do? You triage them. You spend them on the rich, not you personally, but the royal you.
No, I probably would too. I mean, if I had, I probably would too. I would
Right.
too. Yes.
The rich, the powerful, who's going to give you money and influence and all these things. Business leaders, religious figures, etc.
Who
And the
get me on
problem is,
TV?
yeah, exactly. Burn them on who can get you in front of the most eyeballs. And
Yep.
so the problem with this is that you spend those relationships there, but they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They want
Right.
to cultivate a relationship right back where you pick up their perspectives. So the idea of Nation Builder was, okay, let's figure out how to cultivate lots of relationships with lots of people, expand the brain of the movement, and then cultivate individual, real, honest to goodness, meaningful, deep relationships with citizens all across if it's local congressional districts, all across there, through to the American Heart Association people.
So hold on. Let me move if I could. Now you're saying that's what you're trying to achieve at Nation Builder. I get that, but then you realize that when it came to the left-right paradigm, all they were doing was just going after the valuable people and not caring about the individual anymore. And now you're like, let me try to go to this forward thing where we can do some bottom up stuff. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So ultimately what the Forward Party is trying to do is build a credible, viable, durable, new kind of party. And that new kind of party is a party that orients around people, puts power back in the hands of ordinary citizens all across the country. So it's when we talk about leadership as service, when we talk about stepping up and figuring out ways to empower local communities, like that's kind of what we're talking about. How do they make decisions in their communities? Because frankly, like, you don't want me and 30 other people on staff making decisions about what our policy prescription should be, like behind a keyboard. Like that's ridiculous. So the idea here is how do we
hold on. Haven't many Americans kind of accepted that as the thing? Yep. Haven't they kind of, I get what you're saying. Do I want that? No, I'm with you 100%. And at the same time, I think most Americans have said, well, that's what we got. So let me pick the least bad of these keyboard warriors who are making decisions. They both suck, but she sucks less than him, so I'll vote for her. I mean, haven't we kind of gone there?
We tragically have. So we tragically have. And the easiest way to describe this pitch for the Forward Party is something I heard in North Carolina. I was there with our newly elected executive committee, which comprises incredible volunteers all across the state. They were elected by the people of North Carolina. We met them for the first time in person a couple of weeks ago. Guy took out a whiteboard and he draws a football field with 2 end zones on the other end, 50-yard line right down the middle. And he says, most people, and he kind of draws a circle encompassing everything in between the 20s, more or less. He says, most people are like in this ballpark, right? The problem is election day comes around. There's only 2 end zones. There's a Republican end zone and a Democrat end zone. And so people are saying, do I have to march 60 yards, 70 yards, 80 yards, or do I only go 40 yards in that direction? 40 yards is not where they are standing. It's still like, it's a trudge. The idea of the Forward Party is to say, okay, most people are between the 20s or between the 30s. This is kind of where most of America is. Let's draw clear parameters around a value set, and then say individual candidates are going to have very different perspectives. They're going to be a hell of a lot closer than the opposite end zone. So the idea is you give people something a lot closer to what it is they believe. It's not going to be perfect for everybody. It's going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, but if to say that, right, I guess this is definitely a different way of looking at things, because that middle ground that you're looking for, that 50-yard line in New York City, is a very different 50-yard line than, say, rural Texas, right? These are very different 50-yard line. I mean, they're on a 50-yard line, but the middle ground in New York City, way different than the middle ground in, say, rural Texas. Does that mean that a Forward Party candidate in Texas would be very different from a Forward Party candidate in New York City? Is that what you mean?
Absolutely the case. I see that as a feature, not a bug. We'll talk about the complications there in just a moment. But I think it's going to get more specific than that. I think a Forward Party candidate in El Paso is going to look very different than Denton. It's going to look very different than Dallas. Bring it up to our city. Us voting for a local forward party candidate here in Queens is going to look incredibly different than voting for a forward party candidate in Schenectady, right? And that's okay. That's a good thing. What you have to do, though, is contain that within a clear, coherent values framework. And so that's where we get to core principles, which is free people, thriving communities, vibrant.
So literally, you just set it up. Someone just put up a comment. They asked, the core of any party is its mission and values.
Yeah.
What are they for forward? And this is Michael Voss, runs the podcast No Sound Bites Allowed. He'll probably be reaching out to you later for an interview, just letting you know.
Yeah,
he probably will be. But anyway, so yes, he's upstate New York. He's a southern tier, New York outside. I think he's in Broome County, if not mistaken. So he's up there. But my point is, he has a valid question, right? Which is, okay, so if someone who is in Texas may have very different policies than someone who's in Queens, right? So what is the common mission or the common values that those two people would share?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this, but the core values of the Forward Party are free people, thriving communities, and vibrant democracy. We can talk about what that means in just a moment, but there's another element to that, which is this unifying bottom-up approach. So spelling out what those individual priorities, what those individual principles mean in detail is a matter of electing a body of people who can actually fill that out and flesh that out in full detail. And then at the state level, you again have a grassroots election by which you set your priorities in that state. And then candidates, of course, are going to have their own, they're going to be running against each other and things like primaries from time to time. They're going to have very different perspectives on the issues, and that's okay. But what you have to do is set this core values framework, and that is free people, thriving communities, vibrant democracy.
So with that in mind, right, I feel like that Forward might be doing much more of an endorsement than actually picking separate candidates. Am I wrong? That's what, from what you just said, that's how I feel. Is that true or no?
You mean people running not with an F next to their name, running with an R or a D or an L or a G?
Well, in certain states, like I know you can do it in New Hampshire, in New York, you can have multiple lines. So in New York, you could have, multiple lines, but in certain states, no, you've got to run as an F or a D or an R or an L. Certainly. Are you saying that in most states you would spend more of this time endorsing versus running candidates?
No, absolutely not. Okay. Huge number of these places, people are going to be running as forwardists. Now, there are going to be places where we're absolutely going to endorse Republicans and Democrats, and local state parties are going to endorse Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians or Greens, as they did in your election. But ultimately, we are trying to build a new independent, completely separate political party. And that's going to mean a lot of candidates. Look, man, by the end of this year, I would be shocked if we didn't have several hundred candidates on the ballot in the municipals this cycle, which, by the way, leads to another point. I'm sure I can't see the chat box from where I am here, but I'm sure somebody has said, who's running for president in 2024 somewhere in.
They haven't said it yet.
Oh, they haven't. All right, cool.
Not yet. Well, that's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Well, I just said it, so I might as well address it. But the reality is, there are 520,000 elected offices all across this country.
Yes, I'm aware.
1,000. That fills Yankee Stadium 7 days in a row and a half again on the 8th day. That is ridiculous. A huge number of those races are completely non-competitive. Same guy sitting on the chair. Not if he has to stand up for an election, it's 70-30, 80-20 slaughter. Now, most of them, not most of them, but a huge number of them are nonpartisan. So that's is what it is. So it's a little bit of a false flag, but huge number of these are nonpartisan or are partisan races. We're actually much more focused on who's running for city council, who's running for county commissioner, who's running for board of education. So that
I was literally just in Jacksonville, Florida. I was just in Jacksonville, Florida, supporting 3 libertarian candidates who are running for city council of Jacksonville. I completely get that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Completely get it. Yep. I'm sorry, keep going. I apologize.
No, that was the end of that particular monologue.
So let me do a little bit of admin if I could. Guys, if
Yeah.
you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more of what Will's talking about, head on over to Twitter and follow him there at Hey Will Conway. Please do that. Also, his links are in the description. If you want to check him out at the Forward Party, I put his bio there too. If you want to check it out there, please do so. If you want to support me, there's something simple you can do. Click the like button now. If you like it, click the like button. If you don't like it, why are you watching? What's wrong with you? So click the like button already. I know what you're doing. Click the button. It doesn't cost much. It costs nothing. So just do that. If you happen to be watching this on Twitter, please retweet this right now. It does matter. Retweet it so more people can see it. If you want to support the show directly, you can. Two ways. Number one, you can super chat me if you want to on YouTube. That's awesome. Large up YouTube. Please super chat me. If you don't want to pay any cash because you're not in a good spot right now, no worries at all. Head on over to my sponsor, theadvocates.org, and take the world's smallest political quiz. Take that quiz and share it. It is free. You can take it. It's free. Take about a minute or two. Take it and then share it out there. And when you share it, other people will see it and they'll take it too and they'll talk about it. And those cool conversations pop up. They are my sponsor. It makes them happy. It makes me happy. And it's free. Let me say it again. It's free. Cost you nothing. 2 minutes. That's it. So please do that if you can. If you want to super chat me on YouTube, you can. If you're on Twitter, please retweet this now. If you haven't clicked the like button, I don't know why you hate me. I don't understand what I've done to you for you to hate me. Click the like button. It does matter tremendously. So let me keep going if I could. From what you're telling me, so you will have candidates. You will also endorse, you'll do both. But you're really about fixing the system. So one of the core policies, if I would call it a policy, I'm not sure if I would, while the individual local policies might change depending upon where the person is, whether they're in Queens, New York, or rural Florida, whatever the case may be. But there are some core things you're concerned about, which is fixing the system. Things like ranked choice voting, open primaries, things like that. What I call, by the way, the program, BRO, better ballot access, ranked choice voting, and open primaries. That's BRO, the program. I agree with you 100%. I'm all on board with that. I feel like that is your core more than anything else. Have I misunderstood that, or is that true?
No, from a policy perspective, that's correct. From a structural standpoint, that's a huge part of what has to happen, because that allows, we've been living in this world in which we've been, and I know you know this as a former libertarian candidate, in which the first question you're going to get if you're running as not a Republican or a Democrat is how you're not going to spoil this election, as if they all weren't spoiled already. But that's a whole other topic. The reality is, what this package does, more or less, is set up individual voters with more choice in individual elections. It also allows independents to have their voice heard, and it can tone down the rhetoric, especially along the lines of open primaries, because individual candidates have to appeal to a broad swath of the electorate, not just the 10% of the most partisan voters in their own party. Right now, I mean, basically the only way to lose re-election, the incumbent re-election rate is 94%. That's for U.S. Congress. It's higher than that in most state houses. That is ridiculous. The only person who lost in Texas this year, the only state rep who lost in Texas this year, he got redistricted and he lost to another incumbent. It was the only one.
Yes.
So,
absolutely, yes.
So the reality is the only way to lose re-election is to be that sad sap, or to piss off your own party so much that they primary you and put up another guy. So you have to appeal to that group of people. So you got to figure out a way out of that. That's the structure here when it comes to
my district here in Astoria. I'm in AOC is my congressperson.
Yep.
So you know where I live, right? Yep. That's where I live. And at the state level, to your point, the state house, the Democrats have controlled this state house seat for 22 years. Actually, longer. I'm sorry, longer. But the Republicans in 22 years have run a candidate only once. They haven't run a candidate in over 10 years. And then when they did run a candidate 10 years ago, he lost by 70 points, not 17, 7-0. He lost 85-15. The Republican Party in my district doesn't really exist. Literally, it's some guy's home phone. That is literally, I'm not joking when it's like some guy's like, hey, what's up? It's Louis. Hey, Louis, how you doing? Yeah, I'm the Republican lead here. Okay, what's up, Louis? I'm working now. Can I call you after 6? Done. That's basically how it works. That is my Republican Party here in this area. So, I mean, I get it completely. But now, if we bring in a forward party person, my assumption then is you would be strategic, similar to what AOC did, right? When I look at AOC, she did. I'm not a fan of AOC. I mean, I'm a libertarian, of course not, right? I'm not a fan of AOC. However, I will always give her credit where credit is due. And she busted her rump for her first run. She knocked on my door. Literally, they knocked on my door. Like they were out there doing the stuff he talked about, making the 150 people connection. They did all the things appropriately to make that happen. I'm assuming you're talking about that's how Forward would support its candidates, that when the time came, when you do select someone, you throw all the resources there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So here's one of the interesting things about there. I see a major vulnerability in the duopoly, in this two-party system in which we live. And it's that they've been set up in these trenches and they're playing trench warfare. They're incrementally encroaching on each other's trenches and they're set up in the same places. Nobody is watching the medical tents. Like nobody
Right.
is expecting,
Right.
like deep Republican territory is deep Republican territory. Rarely does any Democrat win there. And the reason is I just read this fantastic book called Dirt Road Revival. It's on the bookshelf behind me. And it's about Democrats in very rural Maine, which the further north you go, the further south you go when you get north of Portland, more or less. And the conversation was basically like, she ran as a state rep or a state rep and then state senator in a very Republican district. And she ran as a Democrat and she won. But the first time out, it was for doing exactly this. She hustled. She hit every door in the district 3 times, which is crazy. But first lap, what party are you? Democrat, door slammed in your face.
Yep.
One of the beautiful things about the Forward Party, tactically, strategically, is we don't have that problem. We don't have the baggage of whichever party in that area is the party nobody will vote for. Is the one
I had the same thing, right? When I was running around, they'd say, "Are you a Republican?" I'd be like, "No." Oh, okay, I'll talk to you. Are you a Democrat? No. Okay, I'll talk to you. As long as I'm not the other, I'm good.
Right. And so what makes that so interesting is that there are now districts that are vulnerable in this model, assuming we can get ourselves together to win these elections, to get really high quality candidates. So everything we're focusing on is building a credible, viable, durable party. And by the way, we're having conversation in those districts. I'm not just talking deep red districts. I'm talking deep blue. You go to inner city Chicago, we're having conversations with pastors and religious leaders in those communities who feel they've been underserved by the Democratic Party and taken for granted for generations. And they're not lying. They're absolutely right. By the way, the same thing is true in the deep red rural communities.
Yes.
And so in those spaces, we can go in, we can have that conversation, we can win.
I love that. Let me grab a couple of comments if I could. People are popping up with a couple of comments. Let me see if I can grab here. Nicole asked a question about public schooling. And the reason why I bring this up is it going to be possible for a forward party candidate in one area to be, say, against vouchers, as an example, and another area for a forward candidate to be for privatization of all schooling or something like that, right? Is that type of swing on policy going to be acceptable for the forward party as a whole, or no? Are you going to have a stance on schooling?
So the party itself as a national entity is going to focus on it, and what ordinary citizens commit to, like, voting for on that level are the core principles. Now, yes, candidates in individual districts, 2 forward candidates, might vehemently disagree with each other about schooling. And that's a good thing. That opens up a conversation. Now, the next step here is defining the boundaries are like within which that reasonable conversation can happen. right? So that's, you have a conversation about free people. I get this question from time to time. People are like, oh, what's preventing you from, you know, not saying that like black people should lose the right to vote, or like whatever horrific
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
And the
They
reality
always
is,
go down to the crazy thing. Always.
yeah, of course. They, you know, it's the edge cases where they believe the conversation is. And I get that. But what you have to do is have very, very clear parameters of what falls within, and more importantly, what falls outside the scope of these
Okay.
core values and principles. So that's the work that has to be done, but it takes time because we're doing this bottom up. We can't just write a Google Doc and be like, those are our principles. We need to create room for input.
So two questions, or one comment and one question.
Yeah.
Last year, I was endorsed by the Forward Party, and I had conversation with other Forward candidates. And what I did find is we disagreed on many things, but nobody was mad at me.
Yep.
Like, none of them were like, and Larry, you suck. Like, no one said that, right? They were like, no, we should do this. What I found, a common thing for many people that I talked to, is they were nowhere near as pro Second Amendment as I am. But they weren't angry at me about it. They weren't like calling me names. And that to me was refreshing. I had some of them on my show. We talked back and forth. Some of my audience loved them and they disagreed with them. But the audience actually liked them. They're like, I wouldn't vote for her because, you know, she doesn't do this. But she's a nice person. Like, I like her. And I feel like Forward did a good job with that. I do think that worked well in my own experience, right? That I did. However, are you saying that if, say, for example, the majority of people vote against something, or you see the polling is clear about something, that over time Forward would take a stance on, say, public schooling? Say, I'm making this up for sake of argument, I don't know what the polling is, but say the polling was that the vast majority of Americans want charter schools. Again, I don't know if that's true. I'm making that up. They want charter schools. Would the Forward Party eventually go, you know what? That is our policy. Our policy is the vast majority of Americans want charter schools. Therefore, we're for charter schools.
I would imagine that local state parties very likely would. We at the national level would not.
Got it. Okay.
So most likely where that'll end up.
Got it. So the national level will probably be like, no, where, you know, local Forward parties can do as they see fit.
And by the way, the reason for that is actually because the answer might be very different for different communities. On an issue, that's actually a decent example of an issue where what works, charter schools don't work particularly well in rural areas where the nearest charter school is 400 miles away. They can work particularly well in more urban centers. And that, like, so you, on that issue alone, there's places where that is a great idea and places where it's a terrible idea. And that's kind of the idea. That's the point of the party, is that different communities should create different solutions. There's a landscape of ideas. There isn't one final end solution. And this, by the way, this gets to the other thing that I think is really interesting, is that the process matters. And the process matters more than the policy solution on that given day. So this is where I've seen the Republicans and Democrats go wrong, is that the Republican Party was founded amongst free soilers and abolitionists and Whigs. And it was the party, it could not have drifted farther from its core tenets that it has. I don't understand how we're in this position. Well, the reason we're in that position is because they didn't create a rigid system to define clear, durable values that can only change in the most extraordinary of circumstances. So the idea here is, okay, we're going to try out lots of ideas. Different local communities are going to work for the betterment of their local communities. They're going to try ideas. It becomes like a laboratory. Oh, that worked really well in Phoenix. Let's see if that works here in Tuscaloosa. So you can start to do that kind of work, but it requires consensus building. It requires local citizens coming up with and bubbling up ideas. And it requires candidates to win and get those ideas passed. But it's a matter of incremental, okay, we're going to figure out how to get the coolest. This, by the way, is why I don't ascribe to Forward being a centrist party, because ideas are going to be all over the political spectrum. When you start, your crowdsourcing is not the right term exactly, but when you start creating this sort of network of people coming up with ideas and thinking about the future and how they want their community to work, you get some really radical and interesting and fascinating ideas. And some of them will work and some of them won't. Some of them will get thrown out in committee, and some of them will make it through. And for the ones
So
that work,
let me touch that, because
yeah.
you've said something which I really get, and I saw happen in my own world here, which is you've said that most politicians, when they run, they're actually good people trying to make change.
Yeah.
And then they get into the system and they get warped, I think is the word you use. They just get warped and changed. Right. And I got to tell you, again, not a fan of AOC. However, I see that in her, right? Mm-hmm. I think I don't know the woman at all, so I could be wrong on this, but I'm telling you my outside opinion. I feel like she really wanted to change and do things right. That is my opinion of what she wanted to do. She wanted to get in. She wanted to change things. She wanted the Bernie revolution. I think she wanted all of those things. I think many New Yorkers loved her for it, agreed with her. And that's one of the reasons why she won, and she was so popular. They thought, okay, she's going to do this. But I feel like now she's not that person anymore, right? I feel like now, and again, I don't know her personally. I'm her constituent. This is how I see her and how I view her. I view her as now she's more worried about doing TikTok videos and makeup tutorials. And she would never knock on my door now because she doesn't have to anymore. She is now that person you talked about, to where she's never losing, right? A Republican who ran here, got creamed. And I like the Republican. I know the Republican who ran. I actually know her. And she got creamed, right? And so AOC now has no worries whatsoever. She is now the establishment. And I feel like she's been warped exactly how you say. So my question now is, how do we stop forward people from doing that, right? So I'm a forward person. I've got the right viewpoint. I care about my people. I use the forward policy. I use the forward money and the forward volunteers, and I beat the incumbent, as you say, right? The whole goal works. I'm now that person, but then I'm in. So now I go, I don't need you anymore. So now I decide, to hell with the forward party. I'm just going to change my party, Republican or Democrat, whichever is the gerrymandered district that I'm in.
Sure.
I change parties to that party, whatever the gerrymandered party, and then now I'm good for the next 30 years.
Yeah, in the absurd hypothetical in which somebody runs as forward in order to gain an advantage and then switches to the major parties, I don't know if we've solved that problem precisely yet, but I can't wait for the day when that's our biggest problem. What I will say,
I like that answer.
Yeah,
I like that answer.
What I will say, though, is on the AOC example you just used a moment ago, in that example, you have two factors. One factor are the people who keep her employed. The people who keep her employed are the most partisan people in an already very, very blue district.
Correct. Yes. Right? Agreed.
So
yes.
She has to keep them happy. Yes. Keep the primaries voters happy, and your W-2 stays intact. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, where does the power come from? And that comes from aligning with party leadership. That comes from developing a friendship with people like Nancy Pelosi, right? That a lot of work in that zone.
Yeah.
So your job. So when you talk about warping, money in politics being in addition to this, but when you talk about warping, just look no further than that dual incentive of keep the most partisan people in your district happy, and live by whatever litmus test your boss, they shouldn't be your boss, but your party leader tells you that you have to live by. That is not a recipe for continuing to be an honest broker long term. Very few people have that level. That's a lot of moral courage that we're talking about, to be able to withstand those pressures. So that's
when they do, they either leave or get pushed out. And I think an example of that is Justin Amash, right? Justin Amash started the Freedom Caucus, and he was like, it's not the Freedom Caucus, right? That's not what it is. Like, I started it because I wanted to be a Freedom Caucus. It's not a Freedom Caucus. It's a caucus, but it's not a freedom one. Right. So he literally had to leave the caucus that he started, and he had to quit. I think that's the kind of what you have to do or you become one of them. But you have an answer you've talked about before, and please explain this answer to me. And the answer you come up with, or at least one answer, I shouldn't say the answer. One answer you've come up with is the idea of democracy dollars. If you could explain that concept to me and my audience, understanding how that could be at least one maybe solution or way of helping to kind of take away the negative incentives that we have from party leadership and lobbyists.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating idea. I will say this, democracy dollars is an awesome idea that I personally really like. It was not forward saying, but Will Conway as a human likes likes that idea quite a bit. The thing that's interesting about democracy dollars, it's not officially part of our platform, though many in forward party world support it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I said you came up with it. Oh, it's your thing you back.
No, it's not my it's not my personal.
But you like
idea.
it.
I am a fan. I'm a fan of democracy dollars. But the way the idea works is a lot of people say, okay, there's too much money in politics. Well, the reality is we spend more money every year actually bagging peanuts than we spend on politics, even in a presidential election cycle. That is a ridiculous statistic, and it's a little bit of a flashbang statistic. But the reality is that it's not that too much money is being spent; it's that the wrong kind of money is being spent. So anyway, on that issue in particular, the idea of democracy dollars is that every citizen in the country who is able to vote, of voting age and whatever the requirements are in that state to make sure you're registered to vote, gets a certain amount of money. It's called $100 that they can put to any candidate of their choice who they can vote for. And that's your system. So what that allows for right now is this conversation about misincentives. If you're a congressman and you're looking at all this money that could potentially come into your pockets from name big bad corporation here, ExxonMobil, whatever, then you're thinking about, okay, that's $500,000 if I keep them happy. But the reality is all of a sudden, if there's a group of local citizens who are hyper environmentalists in your district who have access to capital that they can give you, well, the conversation just became a lot more compelling. So that's it's another take on that incentives conversation.
So in this concept of democracy dollars, is it $100 per election cycle or per individual who's running? Like, in other words, if I'm in New York City and I've got a senator and a congressman and a president and a governor to vote for, well, I wouldn't say, but say president, congressman, and senator, do I get $300? Or do I just get $100 and I divvy it up however I want to divvy it up?
I think we're talking about $100 total. That would start to get real expensive.
Okay, got it. Okay, so in a way, you might even have the people competing against each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So like I'm running for Senate, but someone else running for Congress. I'm like, don't give him the $100. Give me the $100. Right. You could even have that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You could even have that.
Yeah.
So where does the money come from? Is the money from local governments? Is the money from the federal government? Where does the money come? Is the money coming out of taxation? Is the money coming out of your own tax base? Where's the money coming from?
You're gonna hate it.
Uh-oh, tell me.
Yeah, that'll be a federal program.
A federal program. Yeah. Okay.
Now, let me say this. I'm not personally 100% sold on democracy dollars, but I do like the idea, and I think a small trial run would be kind of.
If you were instead, I would be okay with it if you do one thing for me, right?
What's that?
Make it a deduction from how much taxes I have to pay.
Oh, that's interesting. Tax deduction.
Then maybe I'm okay with it, right? I mean, maybe I am. In other words, if I got to pay to my federal or my state or whatever, I got to pay $1,000 to the federal government. Now I just pay $900.
Yeah, it's the same money moving around in a different way, basically.
Yeah, but at least I'm not paying anything extra, at least, right? Yeah. So, and in my mind, I'm starving the government a little bit. So maybe I'd be on board with that.
Just got into the psychology of a libertarian there in a way that's useful.
There we go. So maybe I could do a little bit. You got to give me that one. Maybe then I could do it. Maybe. Cool. So yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. But I do like the concept. The concept of it I like because it allows the individual or grassroots to compete against the big boys.
Yeah.
Right. There is a chance of competition. Now, in reality, if it's a very important race like presidential, they'll just spend more money, right? They'll just outspend even the individuals. However, at a local race, I think local people could outspend the big boys because they're not prepared to spend that much money in that. So I do think it could work. So I do like the concept. But let me go to that level. How is Forward going to be able to raise enough money to compete with the hundreds of people you're going to put together. Look, libertarians, we struggle. We've been doing this for 50 years. We've been struggling for 50 years, right? So we've been struggling and sadly failing for 50 years. I raised $500,000 in my first race, about 400,000 in my second race. That was amazing, and it was nowhere near enough. Like, it was amazing and nowhere near enough. Last time the Republican raised like 13 million, the Democrat raised like 20 million. I raised 400,000. While that was wonderful, nowhere near enough. So how does Forward get over that obstacle? If it does, or maybe it doesn't have to, but it's an obstacle either way that the Libertarian Party has not been able to get over.
No, it's a great question, and it's absolutely an obstacle. So I won't dismiss the premise of this question. You're absolutely right. The reality is several folds. One, there's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy thing here. You successfully raise money, you show progress, and then you're able to raise more money. So one of the major things here is strategically, let alone philosophically, but strategically, it makes a lot of sense for us to focus on hyper local elections for the next probably 2 cycles, minimum, potentially longer, but really to think about running for state rep and state senate and down. Like, that's kind of the ceiling. There will probably be a few others, but largely thinking about, okay, how can we support somebody running for city council? Because 520,000 races, most of these races, $1,000 and 3 volunteers goes a really long way.
Yes, agreed.
A really long way. So that's one side of it. The other reality is simultaneously, not, there's Forward Party national, but we are also birthing new political parties, each one of which is building its own independent fundraising infrastructure.
So what you're saying is, as you start focusing on local, right, which is why you're not talking that much about the national platform, you're talking much more about local, that over the course of years, you will have a bunch of local victories, which will then show people, oh, wait a minute, Forward can win. So maybe we can put some money behind them. And then over time, you'll be able to raise enough money to where maybe not in 2024, but maybe in 2028, now you got a shot at some national stuff. Is that kind of where you're going?
Potentially. The distinction between what you just said and where my head is that, first of all, we are the party. We don't dictate if somebody chooses to run for president in 2028. We won't be a full party with a presidential ballot line by 2024. So very few people would want to run. That's a strategic decision we made a while ago. But the reality is, in 2028, people can run for president. That's up to them and whoever their higher power is and their family. But the reality is, our focus is really on this local stuff. If you're able to, first of all, it makes such a bigger impact in local communities than whoever the president is. What's going on with the potholes outside? What's going on with your local elementary school? Those types of issues matter a lot. But the other reality is, these people get leadership experience as local elected officials. And those are people who will eventually be candidates for higher office in the future. So building that bench is also really important. Sure. And then the other reality is, it builds trust in communities. We're saying we're focusing on these types of issues. We're actually following through on that. So there's no faster way to build a fundraising infrastructure than to build trust in communities. And that's what we're doing.
Well, I think if we do that, and again, Libertarians have been trying to do this for a while, and in certain areas we're doing better, right? I think in 2018, when I was able to get ballot access, the next year I crossed the state again, and we had 107 local victories. We had 107 libertarians in New York State in 2019. Then they took ballot access away from us and destroyed us. But I think we were doing it, right? Well, that was my goal, because I think what you've said, I want to bring up. You've said that right now in politics, the political parties, their job is not persuasion, it's mobilization. Yes. They're not trying to get new voters. They don't even care. They just want more of their guys to show up, and then they win. Getting their people to the polls, make sure they win their gerrymandered districts, and everybody's happy. And everyone stays in power, nothing changes. I was trying to get local people to win so that we can start persuading. So you're kind of thinking the same thing. You want to shift into persuasion versus mobilization.
Well, first of all, yes, absolutely. This mobilization mentality, this just let's get more red team people to the polls than blue
Right.
team people, is not a productive way of looking at American politics. It's not patriotic. It's not what the future of our country should look like. Um, we need to build a collaborative environment. So that leads to the other element. Persuasion, kind of, yeah. But actually, the reality is, I am more interested in empowerment, which is I don't want
Oh,
to
okay.
convince you what to believe. I want to give you the tools to work amongst your community, figure out what you believe, and actually get it done. So that to
Got it.
me is almost it's like almost one step beyond persuasion. Persuasion is like we're going to try to convince you and sell you on something, sell you a bag
Got
of
it.
goods that you don't necessarily want.
So it's
Empowerment,
almost like Forward is becoming more of a vehicle than anything else.
a vehicle for ordinary citizens all around the country to have the tools and resources to actually go get done in their communities the change they want to see, for sure.
Got it. Well, Jamir says, I love the conversation.
I do
So
too, Jamie. This is fun.
something's happening. But you went about what you thought were your values. You've also brought up another thing. I don't know where this fits as is it a value or not, but it's about the idea of grace and tolerance.
Yeah.
Now, I felt that in the 4 people I've met. I did feel that. But I don't know how do you make that a thing, right? How is that concrete enough? How does that not come across as how does everything you're saying not just be taken as a platitude? Like I'm just trying to make you happy. Right there, we have so many people who want where are the policies, right? Pete Clark says they have no policies, right? And people are saying that and they're worried about it being a platitude. How do you make it not that, or do you not worry about it?
Well, you have to worry about it a lot. What you have to recognize is what matters so much is the process. So yes, we have these maxims, and for quite some time, grace and tolerance being one of them, for quite some time, that is structurally building a culture organizationally, where generally speaking, you hop on the phone with a third party person, and you're like, good guy. Like I like those people. You mentioned before you met a bunch of the candidates who you're like, oh, these people disagree with me, but we actually get along. They don't hate me
Yes.
for my perspective on issue X, Y, or Z. Well, I mean, our very first maxim is diverse thinking isn't just welcome, it's required. It's like it is
Okay.
baked into the culture. So there's a lot of cultural things you can do there, but ultimately you have to build a structure that supports these things. So that's what we are working so hard to build is a structure by which ordinary citizens all around the country can have input into these things. So it's going to take a minute, but it's happening, and you're going to see it soon. Is an actual structure and vehicle around that
Okay.
bottom-up system that will allow people to start having conversations around policy in ways that are constructive and actually impactful in their communities.
There we go. Let me do a bit of admin if I could. Guys, if you're watching this show and you're liking it, then please click that like button. I can't tell you enough how much it matters. I have to get past all the algorithms. I need to get past all of those rhythms. So guys, help me out by clicking that like button. It does matter. And if you're watching on Twitter, please just retweet it. Right, click the retweet button right now. Don't think. You're thinking. Stop thinking. Click that retweet button right now. It's important. Please do it. It does matter. If you're watching on YouTube, you can super chat me if you want to on Larry Sharpe Super Chat, or you can support the show by supporting my sponsors, theadvocates.org. You can walk over there and take the world's smallest political quiz by clicking the link there, or just go there and click it, or take one of their other policy surveys. The human respect test. It's a great test to take to see where you land in human respect. It's a critical aspect of the advocates. Please take one of their surveys or one of their tests or one of the quizzes and then share it online. Now, some people get mad and go, Larry, they're asking me for my email. Yes, they want your email so they can email you cool things about self-governing. Yes, but it's not required. If you don't want to give them, you don't have to. You can still take the test and share everything. Just click the button anyway, and you can still share it without giving your email. I would like you to give them your email so they can send you cool things. If you don't want cool things, it's about once a month. They don't send that much stuff. I know I'm on a list too. So if you don't want cool stuff, no worries. Do not give your email address, but still share it. It's okay. Just click the button anyway. Or be good, give them the email address. They send you cool stuff. Either way it works. But no matter what you're doing, click that like button. It does matter. So I want to grab a couple more comments if I could, Will, if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
People are asking, you did ask, it did come up. Yang isn't running. They're asking about presidency, of course, right?
Yep.
And you have both sides of this. You have people who think Yang's done, I don't want him running anymore. And you got people thinking Yang's the greatest thing in the world. Why the hell isn't he running? I think you have both of those people here right now thinking, why is Yang running or not? Do you have any insight as to whether he'll be running or not?
Yeah, for better or for worse, he's not running for president.
Okay, there we go. Okay, and it's answered. There we go. Yes. So for those of you who are unhappy, I'm sorry. For those who are happy, congrats. So whichever one, it's all good. Yes. So,
yeah.
but
and by the way, nobody at the Forward Party is planning a presidential run in 24. And you'll see that as time goes on, it will become increasingly obvious that this is true. There are strategic decisions we would have had to make at least 6 months, but more like 12 months ago to actually make that a reality. Larry, you know exactly what it takes.
I know completely. Yes.
The difference between collecting X number of signatures and Y number of signatures in state X, Y, or Z in order to get presidential ballot line versus just an ordinary. It's all over the country. It's very different. I'm in all those conversations. We are not thinking about presidential. We are thinking about the local stuff.
I am aware. For some people, for me, ask a question like, well, why didn't the Forward Party, get a line for you in 2022? And I was like, because they couldn't. The amount of money and time and energy required I couldn't do it, right? And I've done it before and I couldn't do it. So the Forward Party, I gotta say, was good to me in that they still endorsed me. They still put me on the website. Yang was on stage with me during Freedom Fest last year. So all good. Some other parties stabbed me in the back. Forward did not do that. Forward was very forward with me and told me straight up, here's why, here's what we're doing. So since I knew that already, I realized that to get 50 state ballot access in 2024 in New York State is going to cost $500,000 at least, and someone like me to do it. And there's only one like me in New York State right now.
One too. It's by comparison, there are some states where you got to go out and collect. I think Texas. Well, we're going to do this in 2024, hopefully for state party status. Regardless, but in the state of Texas, you have to go out and get 120,000 signatures in something like, I'm forgetting it offhand, I believe it's 90 days. It might be a little bit longer than that. It's ridiculous. Very
yes, difficult. But I would take 90 days. I could do that. I got 6 weeks. So I will take 90 days. Wow. Yes, absolutely. So
what else we got?
100%. Yes, there are a couple of those. Logic says she's worried about gun control. She says, I'm still not sure what to think of the Forward Party. Andrew Yang old gun control stance is a cause of concern for me. And I think most libertarians worry about the Second Amendment when it comes to Forward. Because I think most of the Forward Party people I met, I think almost all of them, there were a couple exceptions, almost all of them were for more gun control. So I think that does always scare libertarians. Really? Yeah, most were.
Interesting sample. So I'm personally a little more to a sympathetic than it sounds like the other folks you spoke to. We do have quite a few people who come from Republican politics, have a background that's a little bit more conservative. Joel Searby, our new CEO, comes more from that side. Lindsay Drafts, our new CEO. Joel Searby is our managing director. These folks are they come historically from Republican politics, but we also have folks who come from elsewhere. One thing I will say that I think is important, again, for better or for worse, Andrew is wonderful. He's an eloquent speaker. He's capable. His personal, similar to how we said before, if two forwardists are running against each other and they disagree, that's part of it. Well, right. If Andrew ran against somebody like Christy Todd Whitman, who is also on our board of directors, they're going to have very different perspectives on these issues. That's a good thing. That's part of the game. So yeah, that to me is a good thing. But all this to say, if you disagree with something Andrew Yang said in his presidential in 2020, that doesn't mean that thing is what the Forward Party will just blindly follow. That's actually the opposite of the point.
Well, that's actually made some people unhappy, right? And I think Roger brings this up. He says UBI is a major concern, as well as especially with the banking cartel programmable CBDCs. And what I mean by that is a lot of people really liked the UBI idea or the negative income tax idea, things like that. And I think some people feel like, oh, that's why I liked them, right? That was the cool thing, the $1,000 a month thing. That you're right. So I think that too. You must be getting pushback with people who are saying, what happened to those things, right? How do you handle that kind of pushback from people who came to Forward because of Yang and his policies, which now his policies, to your point, isn't what Forward's about. Forward's about other things and more of a vehicle and changing the system. There's got to be people who are upset and go, but I like the Yang stuff, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. The reality in that moment, though, is that there isn't going to be somebody riding in on the white knight to get UBI through or negative income tax through. The reality is this is up to you in your local community to get it done.
Got it.
And if that's an issue that matters to you, get it done. Run for office, advocate for it at City Hall. We will empower you. We'll give you the tools and resources to make that happen. We need your help building the structure of this party at the local level, and we'll empower you to get to pass the issues so long as they fit within free people, thriving communities, and vibrant democracy. You are well within the right place.
Well, there we go. Josh says, shout out to Will. So thankful that he and all the other forwardists are brave enough to look at the massive challenge of taking on the duopoly and not flinching. Defiant optimism, forward together. So yes,
Thanks,
do you know Josh?
Appreciate that. I do. He works.
There we go.
He works at the party as well. Josh is a lovely guy. There's a bit of a plant. He's a wonderful guy.
I got it. There we go. Well, Mike comes back and says, so populist at a national level and the strongest voice in any particular region. Is that an accurate answer?
I know. So the reality, so what he is concerned about there is a reasonable concern, that fear of like, can it just be taken over by, whichever group of people, not for anything, but libertarians have recently had an experience of.
Yes, absolutely.
So the reality is you have to build a structure that allows for lots of different types of input, but is also sturdy enough to not drift from its values and the principles it holds dear. It can't just be susceptible to the whims of the moment or the fact that a bunch of people on 4chan started voting in whatever forward party thing or some terrible. So you have to build a really durable structure. When we say credible, viable, durable, that's what we're talking about with durable, is a structure that can withstand those pressures. So that, by the way, I will say, is unbelievably hard to build, but we have some of the best experts in the world building that. And that system itself is something that people are involved in building. So much more to follow.
I agree with you.
I'm very excited to come back in a couple months and.
But the advantage,
yeah.
The advantage, I think, though, is I think, just to be forward with you, I think that's going to happen someplace. Like somebody someplace is going to take over a forward local area and do something stupid. I think that's going to happen. However, if you have a large enough organization, it shouldn't matter that much. It'll be a blip, right? Oh my God, the crazy communists or crazy fascists took over this one forward party local thing someplace. That sucks, but now we've handled it and we move on. I think that's going to happen, but that happens in Democrats, Republicans too.
Of course.
So I think it does.
Yeah.
So Joe is on your side. Joe says, I like decentralization. And then he quotes, different communities should have different solutions. So you got a fan.
Nice. I like it. Thank you, Joe.
There we go. You do have some fans. I do like that. So let me see if I can grab a couple more of that. I have a bunch of people here. John says, what are Will's thoughts and views on immigration north-south border and those that come by plane? I think he's asking your personal views on this one.
My personal views on immigration are that we are incredibly bad, again, personal, not forward party. We are incredibly bad at managing our southern border, which is a detriment actually largely to the people who want to be here. We have, in our entire history as a country, has been as a nation of immigrants. We have to build a structure by which people can come to this country peacefully, legally, and in a way that allows them to be successful here. We're just bad at managing this problem. That's a competency problem. That's, to me, not really an ethical concern. It's not, it has ethical implications. It's not really it's not a policy perspective. It's the government has to work better and function more effectively than it currently does.
So I have another interesting question. Is again from Joe. I'm pumping Joe again. Joe's smart and savvy, so he's out of Florida. He says, "Is the Forward Party trying to recruit currently elected officials?"
Oh yeah,
right. And this is something that you do that, and it's instant credibility, right? Now we have a forwardist here. The thing that we're going to have to worry about here, and you'll worry about that we had to worry about too, is when we've done that. And we've had like someone switch to become libertarian. No one calls them libertarian. They always call them independent, even though they're libertarian. So it's Republican, Democrat, independent. I think you're going to have that same problem. If you recruit some person to become forward, they're going to go, well, he's independent. You mean forward? No, he's independent, because they don't want to give you any ad space whatsoever. Have you guys thought about this?
I'm ashamed to say I personally haven't, though we have some brilliant folks on the messaging side who I'm sure have. I will say, not only are we thinking about going out and recruiting, again, like-minded folks who would be good culture fits and policy orientations, et cetera, but we actually, quite a few of them are ready to switch. So you'll see a lot more on that in the coming weeks and months. Yeah.
That's amazing. Jeremy says, Forward's new CEO, Lindsay Williams-Draft's background is in finance and sourcing donors. Don't underestimate their ability to pull in cash. Well, that's a good thing. I like that. Libertarians we need her to come to us for a little bit, just like a year. It's like a year.
Nah, she's staying with us for a little bit. Lindsay is. Let me just take a minute to say this. Lindsay is an absolute rock star. She, like me, left Republican politics for more or less the same reason, and was had moved over to Unite America, which is an outstanding group. She actually exceeded her very aggressive stretch goal of raising $100 million with Unite America. She did it, and actually did quite a bit more than that over the course of, I believe, 2 years. She has already proven to be an unbelievable CEO, direction and guidance, really effective structures to make us a really effective organization. Lindsay is a tremendous leader. Talk about raising money. She is really good at that, but she's also really good at just the work of leading a community of like-minded people. She's wonderful.
Nice. Josh says, every party needs more grace and tolerance.
Couldn't agree with you more, Josh.
Absolutely, Josh. Roger goes on and asks a very important question about policy. He says, Conway, there is only one way to empower voters. That is through the citizen ballot initiative process, to use it to ratify our own amendments to their state constitution. Does the Forward Party, and I don't mean you will, I mean the Forward Party, does the Forward Party have any stance on citizen ballot initiatives? Is there a view that the Forward Party has on this?
Do we mean just ballot initiatives, generally speaking?
Yes, right. Like certain states have it. The Rogers in New York, just like I am, and we are frustrated that the only way we can get a ballot initiative pushed forward is if our assembly already agrees to it. Right. And our assembly is literally a supermajority Democrat.
Right.
So all we get is what Democrats want. Then they push it forward. We vote for it, and they take cover and go, well, I didn't vote for it. The people did. Sure. That's how we currently are screwed over in New York State. And I agree with Roger. I think we need to have ballot initiatives in New York State for the people. I'm on board with it 100%. It's part of my platform. I agree. My question is, I know Forward's already with the program, better access, ranked choice voting, open primaries. Is there a policy on citizen ballot initiatives?
I am personally a huge fan of them. Forward has aligned with quite a few of them nationally. So
in Nevada recently.
Nevada, for instance, Nevada. Now they have to go through lap 2. So for those who don't know, Nevada just via ballot initiative passed, much to the chagrin, by the way, of both the Democrats and the Republicans in the state of Nevada, passed a Final 5 ballot measure, which includes ranked choice voting and open primaries and the Final 5 setup. They pass it once. They have to because of a quirk in the Constitution, the Nevada state Constitution, they have to run it again. So they have to run it back a second time. If they pass it again in 2024, now it's state law. So that's what they're working on. Nevada, we're strongly in support of that. Huge number of the people who are advocating for that are also leaders in the Forward movement in Nevada. we're seeing that all over the country. I highly suspect you'll see more of that coming. Alignment, volunteer sharing, like those types of things. There are also movements close to home for you and me there. There's a new Final Five measure here in New York City.
Yep, absolutely. I am hoping. I'm hoping. If it's in time for the mayor, you might see me in that race. We'll see.
Yeah, I like it.
Because I'd make top 5. I would actually make top 5. So I could actually do that. That would be something I consider. Absolutely. James is a Yang fan. He's one of the people who's unhappy. He says, I love Yang, but he says he shouldn't run. So you're good. You've made him happy. So it's great.
Yeah, there
so
you go.
Good. So yes. Lars asked, what's Will's idea on ranked choice voting and term limits? And does the forward party have position on these? I know you already have it on ranked choice voting. Is there a policy for term limits for the forward party?
Not explicitly, but you're not going to, not like on the website, but you're going to come across, you're not going to come across very many forwardists who are not in support of term limits. So unofficially, it's kind of in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I feel like that feels like a forward party policy, even if it isn't. Like it feels like it is.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's all about changing the system. So when I think of systemic change, I feel like forward's going to be like, yeah. That's what I feel like. So yes. So Patty says, I always like Yang for his ideas and funny little stories. While campaigning for Bernie, we in the Yang gang helped each other here in upstate New York. So
nice.
I think that's true. I feel like people liked Yang for many reasons, but one of them is he felt like the rebel, right? So they wanted the rebel, and he was the rebel. So they kind of went with the Yang team because he was a rebel. The question is, can forward, and this is just your opinion, can forward retain the rebel feeling or brand while becoming a bit more mainstream? Or will you lose that rebel, like, oh, now he's one of them, right? Or no, they're still rebels. What do you think?
Yeah. So it's a fantastic question. I think I have always found forward to be kind of punk. Like it feels almost countercultural in a certain kind of way that I really like. Look, the end case here, the end state of this is that so long as those values of grace and tolerance, free people, thriving communities, vibrant democracy stay intact, some people are going to be super rebel types. Some people are just going to be ordinary citizens. When this thing breaks in that way, I'm super excited. If that changes the energy of it a little bit, no problem.
There we go. Gene says, I'm liking the conversation here. So
thanks, Gene.
You're winning. There we go. Will asks, Will Conway, is Forward going to support New York State candidates in 2024? Do you know what's going to happen in New York State in 2024? Have you guys already decided for 2024 or no?
New York State locals?
Yeah.
So ultimately, that's going to be up to the New York Forward Party, which has a lot of work to do to achieve party status. But New York, as you addressed earlier, has become one of the hardest states in the union, right up there with Alabama, to actually achieve party status in. So potentially, I don't know, could be one of those states, one of those places where we look to endorsing like-minded and aligned Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, say there, those types of folks.
Yeah.
It could also be the case that there end up being independent runs that we support. There could be like kind of quasi-forwardists in that way. There could also be forward candidates. I don't quite know yet.
Yeah. It's funny, the way of getting ballot access for 2026 and 2028 in New York State is going to require a body and a bunch of money. And the problem is who's going to have the money and then the body to do that, right? I think it can be done. We learned last year that how difficult it is. I think it can be done. The question is, how do we make that happen? So maybe you and I should chat about that later. Should have that conversation because maybe there's something that we can do to make that kind of thing happen. I'm not really sure, but maybe we can.
Nice.
So Christian says, decentralizing politics should be the move for the long term. Breaking up states, increasing the number of districts, deregulating election campaign finance, pushing towards centralized politics. So I think he's agreeing with you in general with that localization. But is there a problem here? Meaning, if we can you decentralize too much, I guess is the question, right? I know decentralization is good. People like it. It makes them feel better, empowered, 330 million people. Is there a fear that we decentralize too much? Or is that, in my view, I mean, I'm answering for you in a way, but in my view, we're nowhere near decentralizing. If we just stop moving that direction, I'm good. We'll figure out how far to go. But do you feel like there's a problem that we might go too far?
It's a fantastic question. I too, Larry, am of the mind that we're nowhere near needing to have that conversation.
Right.
But I will say, and I'll say this to somebody who's currently building a movement that is fundamentally bottom up and is some days like herding cats, and that's wonderful because they're the smartest, loveliest, hardest working cats I've ever met in my life. But
Absolutely.
holy crap, you need a little structure around these things sometimes. So there's always a game to play there. You got to figure it out slowly but surely.
Absolutely. Let me do a little bit of admin if I could. Again, guys, if you're watching this and you're liking it, please click that like button. It really does matter. Please do that. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet it so that more people can see this. I need to get past those algorithms. It does matter. But more importantly, Will came on a Friday night to talk. Follow him on Twitter. Please do that. Give him some love. He's at Hey Will Conway on Twitter. Follow him to give him some love. He's given us some time and given us some good answers. So, Will, I want to say thank you so much for coming on this evening. I think it was amazing. I'm glad you gave me the time that you gave me.
Yeah, this is a blast. I had so much fun tonight, Larry. Thank you for
having me. I am glad. Yes, guys, everyone else, thank you so much for watching. Please support us. I'm off for 2 days, but I'm back here on Monday. I will see you all